Hello everyone. Welcome to this online research methodology workshop. It has been organized by the REST Society for Research International. So the REST Society for Research International, or the RSRI, is a non-profit organization which is active from the last 7-8 years. And our main objective at the RSRI is to popularize the concepts of research, to uh, organize conferences, organize workshops that would help the masses in gaining more knowledge and more exposure on research. So you can check our website, drsri.org.in, and I'm Dr. Kanak Kalita. So you can also go and check out my webpage. So I am currently associated with the Valtech University as an assistant professor in the mechanical engineering department. I have over 6 years of experience in the different fields of like teaching as well as in industry experience. So basically, I am a mechanical engineer who has a PhD in a interdisciplinary subject of structural engineering as well as soft computing. So my core research areas lies in the area of soft computing as well as the structural optimization and structural engineering. However, I time to time I also try to engage with audiences from diverse background on and try to share my uh, knowledge or information on different kinds of publishing practices that they should follow, different kinds of uh, things to do that they should look at while publishing. So in that context, I have published around 22 SCA journals, around 45 Scopus, and 8 ESCA journals. So even after the workshop, if you feel and you need to contact me, if there is any queries or anything, then you can contact me from any of the listed uh, sites here. You can just go and visit my website, which is www.kanakkalita-.com .webnode.com. So here you can go and click on any of these social media sites and you can connect on me. I prefer that you connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always active on LinkedIn. So I prefer that you connect with me there if you have any queries, or even you can write me a mail at one of these email addresses that is here on your screen. Okay. So let us come back to this session. So this session is perhaps the first session of this workshop, and therefore it is important to lay some foundation on the concepts of research methodology or research as such. So in this session, what we'll see is that, or like not only in this session is, I have divided this session because the sheer amount of knowledge or the sheer amount of information that is there on these particular topics on the session called the journals, indexing, impact factors, and more is too much. It cannot be summarized in one session of like 1 hour or 45 minutes. So at least we need two sessions to have a brief understanding of these concepts of the journals, the indexing, the impact factors, and some best practices that you should follow, and some traps that are there for the uh, early career researchers that early career researchers usually fall into. I'll also talk into that and some myths that we believe or early career researchers generally believe. So we'll talk about that also. So, but I should also tell you at the very beginning of this session that the information that we will be giving out on this particular topic, especially the topics of the journals, indexing, impact factors, and more, and other bibliographic uh, practices and the best practices and all that. So, by no means this is a comprehensive kind of workshop because the amount of like 2 hours is a very small time to deal with all these subjects. So people have spent entire research careers on this. So it's 2 hours is quite a less time to speak on this. But nevertheless, I hope that by the end of these two sessions, you will have a brief understanding of all of this and what to do and what not to do, especially as an early career researcher. So in this session, what we'll see is that we'll see the different types of journals. We'll see what are bibliographic indicators. We'll see what is peer review. What do we mean by peer review? And we constantly hear the term indexing and impact factor. We'll also try to look at both of this. though we'll cover only up to indexing in this particular session, and then from the next session we'll talk about impact factors, and we'll talk about uh, what are the traps there are, or how not to fall into predatory practices, and uh, to how to uh, bust some myths there are in the publishing, associated with the publishing and uh, publishing of your articles. So let us begin this workshop by stating something out, that there is no substitute for the research quality. The research quality, or the first thing that you need to publish any article or any paper, is the research quality. So because I believe all of you, the speakers of this particular uh, workshop, are from the research background. So when we talk about uh, publishing, it can be like, it can be a research article, or means something that is emanating from the research, and there can be something that is like an opinion piece, or something based on information that is generally published in a newspaper. So what separates a research article from what is being published, what is being generally published in a newspaper, is the amount of digging that goes into that particular, amount of digging that goes into writing that particular paper, that particular research paper. So when we publish something called a research paper, we extensively study it. We try to present it in the most lucid form. We hope that whatever we have written or whatever we have communicated will be helpful to others in the scientific community, that they will gain from this work, and then they will continue on this work uh, uh, to advance their own research. So that is the prime intention of any research. And so the quality of the research is dependent on the researcher and his ethics and his core values. So, but it is also dependent on the journals to some extent. So, how it is dependent on the journal, we'll see that. But we all know that from our side, it is dependent on us or the researcher, because there is no substitute for quality work, or there is no substitute for solid work, right? So, the first thing that we should remember in today's publish or perish model is, there is constantly a lot of pressure on all of us to publish, even in our institutes, even from the government norms. For example, right now, if you see, for example, there is some ranking of institutes in India that is going on. For example, the NIRF ranking and all that. So, in because of these rankings, what happened is that now there is a lot more pressure on the faculty or the researchers community to publish, because the rankings, one of the metrics in these rankings is the research factor, and this research factor is predominantly measured, especially in India, by the number of papers that you have, or the number of the quality papers that you have, or number of papers, suppose in uh, indexes like Scopus or SCI that you have. Don't worry about if you don't know what is SCI or index right now. We'll talk about this as we go on. But what I mean to say from this statement is that there is tremendous amount of pressure on the researchers right now. This pressure has not been there in the last decade, but right now this pressure is too much, because the institutes want to improve their rank, and one of the metrics for improving their rank in almost all the criteria that they have, for example, the QS ranking or the NRF ranking or any other ranking, or supposedly the Times ranking and all that. So in all of that, one of the factor uh, is the research output of the faculties, or research output of the institute as a whole. So institutions definitely want us to publish more, and when they want us to publish more, what happens is that at some point of time, some of us, I will not say all of us, some of us uh, tend to go tend to take the shortcut, right? So there are different shortcuts that people use to publish, and people tend to take the shortcuts to improve their publication number. But in the long run, I would say that publishing is important, but equally the contents are also important, right? So there's something called the publication impact or the research impact. We'll discuss on that also in the later half of this session. But so what I want to say here is that we should focus on the volume, but we should also focus on the quality that we have in our research. Now, the last important role in preserving the research quality is of the journals that we have, because the journals are the places where we will send our researchers, and they will be like the uh, responsible for putting our research out there to the world, to presenting it presented to them so that they have good access to it, so that it is maintained even after suppose say 10 years or 20 years. Suppose say so based on because of these facts, journals also has a very important role on the research quality. Journals also has a very important role on the research quality because there is something called peer reviewing, or there is something called reviewing. So what happens in how does a research paper normally differs from a newspaper is that, suppose say if you are working in any research, if you are working in any newspaper, so what you do is that you will write a, suppose you are a reporter, you write a piece of article and you send it to your editor. He just sees it and he just decides based on his like demographics of his customers. He decides whether to run this story in his newspaper or not, and then he runs it. So it is just simple as that. So there is no as such a measure of the quality, or there is no a pre-check for the quality that is there in his work. It is there, but it is not that stringent, because he by definition he is a employee of the organization, and the editor thinks that uh, of course whatever he has reported is true, uh, or is justified. But what happens in a research paper is that whenever we report something, it goes through, it should go through a number of checks. It should go through a number of checks, because when we are reporting something, we want that whatever we say, have reported should help the, it should not be just out there in the world, but it should also help the scientific community as a whole to progress. Suppose say you publish some paper and I also work in the same field, I should be able to read your paper, I should be able to understand it, I should be able to replicate it, and I should be able to use the conclusions that you derive in your paper to advance my research or advance the research of the scientific community as a whole. So that is so in there lies the role of the journal. And we will see in the later half of the workshop how some journals or some journal houses have made a mess of this, and that is the reason why currently I would say that the scientific publishing is in a kind of crisis, or uh, not exactly a crisis, but a lot of scientific articles have uh, like they've gained a lot of bad name. So, having said that, so this is the first or perhaps the most important part of the publishing, or getting your article published, or even in or getting your research out there to the world in a very definitive manner and in a very impactful manner. So this part is called the peer review. So peer review is basically what? So peer review is basically that, suppose say you are a researcher from uh, suppose say humanities background, suppose say some special subdomain of the humanities background, and I also am belonging to that particular background, or suppose say somewhat related to that background. So now you have written a paper and you want to publish it in a very good journal. So what is the definition of good? We'll also see on that later. Again, good is a very relative word. We'll see what is the definition of good uh, in in terms of exact numbers, or in terms of justifiable numbers. We'll see that. So what you want is that you want to publish your research in a very good journal, and you send the paper to the journal. So each journal, or each this kind of magazine or the journal, has someone called the editor in chief. So he is responsible for the overall maintenance of the quality of the articles that are being published in that particular journal. So generally what happens is that in small journals, the editor in chief is the all in all, and he manages all these activities, like the whenever the paper comes to him. So he is also responsible for sending it out to review, and then he's also responsible for collecting the reviews and sending it back to the author, and then he's also responsible for seeing that the author has applied to the revision in a timely manner, and on them. So in some of the large journals, what happens is that editor is generally the topmost portion, and then we have a team of the associate editors or the executive editors and so on. So overall, the basic objective or the basic function of the editor is to uh, act as a mediator between you and the peer reviewer. So who is a peer reviewer? Suppose say I told you that you are from some specific humanities background and you have sent a paper to some good journal. So now the editor in the journal will send that paper, will search for some suitable peer reviewers. So peer reviewers, peer means fellow buddies in your own field, right? So you may know them, you may not know them. So the intention is that, so when you have written a paper, they will send that paper to me, and I also, being from the same background, will now read your paper and will comment on it in a very constructive manner. That is the basic idea, that I will read on it, and I will try to, because the editor is not an expert in your field. Editor is like a, he may have expertise in some other field. So but I also, means the definition of, again, the expert is very vague. So I also am someone who is working in your field, so I can better appreciate your research, right? So that is why the paper is being sent to me. So I will read it, I will comment on it. Okay, I think that this and this needs to change, and I think that this and this is presented good, or this is presented bad, and I think this and this cannot happen. So like this, I will communicate my uh, judgment of the paper. Judgment in the sense means my comments on the paper back to the editor, and he will then communicate these suggestions, or these queries, or these questions that I have on your paper back to you, and then you can improve your paper based on my comments, or based on the peer reviewers comments. So that is the basic process of peer reviewing. So peer reviewing in short means that when your paper or when your article is anonymously or knowingly or unknowingly reviewed by someone from your field who is also working in a similar field of you, so that he can give you some, he can make a fair judgment of your work, he can make a fair assessment of your work. So that is the basic idea of peer review. Now, whenever you hear the word peer review, you also hear some terms like blind, double blind, and triple blind. So what basically it means is, blind review means, suppose say you are the author, and and now we have something called the open review also. Let us talk about that also. These are the conventional reviews that we have till now: the blind, double blind, and triple blind. So in the blind review, what happens is that you are an author, and you send your you send your article to the journal, and the journal sends it to me. Okay. So in your article, you have mentioned your name as well as your affiliation, and that is now, when I'm reviewing it, it is available to me also. I can see it. Right? I can see that okay, this paper is written by this XYZ person. But when I write the comments and send it back to you, the reviewer doesn't say you, the editor doesn't say you that who the reviewer was. He doesn't say you my name. He just gives you the comments. He just says that this is supposed to be reviewer one, and reviewer one has given you this comment. So in this kind of a blind peer review model, a single blind kind of peer review model, the author does not know who the reviewer is, but the reviewer and the editor, they both know who the author is. So we both know who are you, or who has written the paper, but the author doesn't know the author doesn't know who uh, the reviewer is. He knows who the, or the editor is, because it is obviously it is mentioned in the journal website, but he doesn't know who the author is. So that is the first thing. So in double blind review, what happens is that when the editor gets the paper from you, when you submit a paper, so what the editor does is that he removes all your personal information from the paper and sends it to the reviewer, or sends it to me, suppose. So in that sense, I do not know who has written the paper, and you also do not know who has got your paper for review. So that is basically blind review. So in blind review, or in double blind review, both the author as well as the reviewer doesn't know who the other counterpart is. The reviewer doesn't know who the author is, and the author doesn't know who the reviewer is. So that is double blind review. Now there is again something called triple blind review. In triple blind review, what happens is that the author sends a paper to the journal, and there are some administrative staff in the journal who are not related to the technical part. They are just administrative staff. So they just make it sure that your no personal information is there on the manuscript or in the paper that they've sent, and then they send it to the editor, or suppose the editor in chief. So now the editor in chief doesn't know who the author is, and he then sends it out to the reviewer. Then reviewer also doesn't know who the uh, author is. Okay, so this kind of a model is called the triple blind review. So in triple blind review, author may know who the editor is, okay, because it is listed in the website, but he doesn't know who the reviewer is. The editor will know who the reviewer is because he himself has sent it out, but he doesn't know who the author is. And the reviewer knows who the editor is because the reviewer has sent him the paper, but he doesn't know who the author is. So in all this, there is some blindfolding for someone, right? So the author doesn't know who the reviewer is. The reviewer doesn't know uh, who the author is, and similarly, the editor doesn't know who the author is. So this is a triple blind kind of peer review. Now there is something that has gained traction just recently from the last 2 3 years, and that is called the open review. So what basically open review is that, and why the need for open review was felt? We'll discuss a little on that also. So basically, what was happening with this blind review kind of thing was that there was certain some kind of abuse, especially in the single blind review. In the single blind review, there was some kind of abuse. So what abuse it was there was that, suppose say you are the author and you have submitted the uh, paper to a particular journal, and it has been sent to me for review. I don't like you. I don't like you. Maybe out of personal jealousy, or maybe out of, suppose say, something, for some reason, or maybe suppose say, I am also working in the same field, and I see that okay, this and this he has written, and let me delay him, or let me get his paper rejected. So in the meantime, I can finish my paper, and I can publish it before you. So this kind of abuses were also seen in the system. So that is why now most people are not going for, now most journals are not generally going for single blind, because there is some amount of abuse in the single blind. So then they decided to go for the double blind. In double blind also, what happened was that uh, most of the times the editor, the reviewer could figure out, if suppose say he is a expert from your field, and he is an expert from your field, and he is also very active in your field, there are certain ways to find out or to figure out who the author is, because every author has some kind of, especially when it is a seasoned author, then you can find it out easily. If it is a new author, it is difficult to find who the author is. But if suppose he is a seasoned author, or he has already published, suppose say, 5 to 6 papers in that same journal, then it is easier to find out who that author is, because when you read through the paper, each author has a definitive tone. For example, if you see my papers, I have a very definitive tone. I have a very because all of us tend to, because research paper is what, research paper is saying a story, and you are saying the story in your own way, and the story is whatever the research that you've carried out. So all of us have some kind of tone when we write the research paper. All of us, knowingly or unknowingly, subconsciously or consciously, we have some specific features that we put in a research paper. So based on that, some reviewers may find out. Some may find out that okay, this is the author. So there was some kind of abuse in that system also, and so on. And similarly, the same thing for the triple blind also. So what the need was felt was to have some, and one of the constant problem with the blind reviews, especially with the single blind, double blind, or triple blind, was that the author was always hiding behind the shield of anonymity. Anonymity means he was anonymous. Yeah. Obviously, you never know who the reviewer is. So the reviewer was free to say you any kind of things. For example, in a lot of reviews that were sent out there by different journals, it was seen that the reviewers sometimes become very harsh. They use very harsh language. They say that okay, this is a very poor kind of research, this and that. Maybe because of personal vendetta, maybe it is, but generally it is suggested that it is suggested by the journals to the reviewers that you should not use a very harsh kind of tone, and you should not be over critical of the manuscript or the paper. But sometimes, because the reviewer is hiding behind the cloak of anonymity, he is anonymous, so he can say anything. So that is why there was some kind of this also. So based on all these factors, the need for open review as well. So open review is basically what? Open review is something when you send a paper. So when you send a paper, then this paper goes to some person, and initially they will not tell you who the reviewer is. But when it is published, so it is published with your name, as well as in the bottom, or suppose say in any part of the paper, it would also be mentioned that this paper has been reviewed by this person, and this person has acted as the editor. So the information about the editor, as well as the information about the reviewer, is also mentioned in this kind of journals, or in this kind of paper. So these are like the most recent uh, advances in the, or the most recent trends in the peer reviewing. So where they make the information of the reviewer also very public. But it is again a very small subset of journals who are following this, because again there is some issues in this also. So let not go into that. So basically the peer review, in essentially it is a basically generally what happens is that the most of the journals, they do not pay, or you can say that 99% of the journals do not pay anything for conducting the peer review. Okay, so in that sense, peer review is a pro bono kind of work. The reviewers do it for free, just do it for the sake of doing it, or maybe for their personal advances, like it may help in their promotion and all that. And also because a lot of the active researchers, or a lot of the researchers who are very active, they like to read a lot. So uh, whenever you read some new manuscript, you get some new ideas, and you are in touch with the, when you review something, you are in touch with the latest that is going on in your field. And you are also and you also get a uh, like chance to see the publishing world from the other side. You, when you read a paper and when you find some mistakes, so as a reviewer, when I read some paper and when I find some mistakes in the paper, I make a mental note of it. Okay, let's not repeat this mistake in my papers. So that is also some kind of benefit that we get out of the peer review. So basically, the peer reviewing has something called the peer reviewing has a little bit of time also involved with it. So it depends from journal to journal that how much the journals give the reviewers time to review the paper. But generally, for most good journals, it is around 1 month. The reviewing time that they give to the reviewer is 1 month, and after that there will be delay from the editor side or the editorial side and so on. But generally, they provide around 1 month to the reviewers to review this particular journals. Now, there's an important tip for all the early career researchers, is that always make sure that the paper that you're publishing, that the journal that you're publishing is peer reviewed. Okay, never published in any journal which is not peer reviewed. Okay, and again we'll talk about some fraudulent journals who say that they're peer reviewed, but in actuality, what they're doing is some kind of bogus research. So I'll talk about them in the later half of the uh, session. So specifically, we are talking only about the scientific journals. There are different kinds of other journals also. For example, the trade journals, or the society, like the society newspaper journals kind of things. So we are not talking about them. We are talking specifically only about the scientific journals, where we are assuming that in scientific journals, we are talking about scientific journals, and we are assuming that in these scientific journals, peer review is being done. So peer review, in other sense, we are talking only about peer reviewed journals. Okay, we are talking only about journals where your paper or your work is being assessed by someone else or someone expert in your field. Okay, so we are talking about only those kind of journals in this particular workshop or in this session. So now these kind of journals can be like divided into three different parts. It can be divided into the limited access journals, it can be divided into the open category journals, and then the something that we should all stay away from, that is the predatory journals. So the limited access journals are basically the subscription model journals. For example, in this limited access journals, what happens is that when you write a paper, you send it to the journal and it goes through the whole due review process and your paper is accepted. Then after, what happens is that the generally the journal would want you to sign a copyright form. What is the meaning of copyright? Copyright means you are giving the ownership to that particular journal or to that particular publisher. So generally it is not to the journal, but it is to the publisher. So in limited access journals, there is something called the copyright transfer. So in copyright transfer, basically what you are doing is that whatever the work that you have done, you are signing a copyright, and you are saying that now this particular journal has the full control of my article, and if there is something, some monetary benefit is being derived out of this uh, journal, I have no claim over it. I only claim is that then my name will appear then, and other than that, there is no claim on this. So that is a limited access journal. So in limited access journal, basically that is the how a limited access journal works. That is not a limited access journal, but that is how limited access journal works. So limited access journal, once your paper is accepted, they will take the copyright from you. You have to sign a copyright that I am giving the full authority of this particular paper to this publisher. So that is what they do. Now, after doing that, what they do is they now put it in their website, or suppose say they publish it, and now these published articles are available to read, are not available to read freely. They are not available to read freely, even suppose say to you. They may provide you with a personal copy, but overall it is not freely available. So how it is available? For that you have to take some kind of subscription. You have to pay, suppose say monthly rental, or suppose say yearly rental, and then you can subscribe these journals. So generally what happens in the academic scenario is that the universities that we work in, or the institutes that we work in, they generally subscribe the journals, and then within the entire university, or within all the computers that are connected with the university network, we can access them freely. But we are not accessing them freely because the university has already prepaid for them, or the institute has already prepaid for them. So the limited access journals based on this kind of a model, or subscription model, or pay per view model, where suppose say if you want to read one paper, you have to you give a particular amount and you can read that paper, and then again if you read the next paper, you have to again give another some amount. So that is the pay per view model. Okay, so that is also comes under the limited access journals. So basically these subscription models and the pay per view models are the limited access journals, where the reader doesn't have free access to the papers. For reading the papers, they must pay for the paper. Okay, they must pay for the article, or their institute, or wherever they're accessing it from, they must pay for the access to the particular article. So now next comes is the open access journals. So open access journals, there are like, again in open access journals there are several different types. I didn't wanted to confuse all of you by giving out all the types. There are types like green open access, gold open access. You will see these terms when you see some journals, that it will be written green open access, gold open access, bronze open access, and so on. There are different kinds of open access. But overall, just understand what open access is. Open access in general, what happens is that I'm saying in general, okay? Because again, in the open access, as I told you, there are different kinds of things like green, gold, bronze, and so on. So in that also some variations is there, but overall, what happens in open access is that the article that you are publishing is freely available for everyone to read. Okay, yeah, the journals doesn't take money from the journals doesn't take money from the readers, but they take money from the authors. In general, they take money from the authors. So when you are submitting your paper to this particular journal, after your paper is accepted, so you need to pay some money so that this particular paper will be available in their website or in their network free of cost for the readers, and the paper will be maintained by them. Okay. So this is the open access model, or the open access journals, in which the readers did not pay anything, but the authors have to pay something. Okay. In general, that is what the case is. Also, there are certain open access journals, where the author also did not pay any money, and the reader also did not pay any money, but someone has to pay the money, because the publisher is not going to pay the money. Publisher is again a very profit-making organization. So who pays the money is that there may be some institute who is sponsoring the journal. For example, there are certain journals like, suppose say, the European Journal of Operation Research. So if suppose say, if that journal is a open access journal, then the European Operation Research body, or the European open access uh, body, they are paying for you. In fact, in the RSRI, we have the open access model. The RSRI group that you know, we run some journals. Just show you. We run some journals, and these are open access journals. Okay, so there is a separate website for it, RSRI for the it is called the restpublishers.com. So you can go to that website and you can see. So in the restpublishers.com,